in exchange for your completed evaluation. I'd be happy to get that. And then if you have cell phones with you, if you could please put them on silent or vibrate at this time. And as you all heard, we do have interpreting that's going to be happening during the workshop today. So you may hear some whispering going on in the background. And just know that that's our interpreters making sure that the information is available for everyone. And last but not least, if you are interested in making a donation to Support for Families, you can do that at our help desk. I also have an envelope here in which I can collect donations here, and you can always do it on our website as well, and that helps to offset the cost of events like this. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our presenter, Joseph Trum. Thank you all.
Hey everybody, how are all of you doing today? I'm going to be talking about how to get kids to do homework today. And before I start, actually on the microphone. So I'm going to be talking about how to get kids to do homework. And before I begin, I just want to mention that I'm going to be talking about a lot of different kinds of kids. So I'm presenting kind of a broad group. So I'm going to be talking about kids maybe who struggle a lot with just to kind of follow basic academics, kids in inclusion environments, but also just kids who are academically, fully capable, have, minimal or no learning issues, but maybe just need help, staying on task. So I'm going to try to cover kind of everything, but I think what you'll find is that a lot of the concepts I go over are pretty universal. So just as an introduction, I want you all to think about this very simple but very important question. Why doesn't a kid do his homework, right? Hit the next one. So as you think about this question, why doesn't a kid do his homework? Keep these two things in mind, which I consider to be facts. One, in my estimation, kids accept that they are supposed to do their homework. Aside from like chores at home, that is pretty much like the main responsibility that a kid has. They're told constantly by teachers, parents, even siblings and peers. They get like your homework is due tomorrow or whatever. They know that they're supposed to do it. And secondly, again, in my experience, kids like learning new things. Kids obviously are young, and the whole purpose of them being in school is that they're, being exposed to new things every day. So even if a kid feels like disengaged from the class or from the material, or if they find something to be hard, I feel like kids enjoy learning like, algebra. They enjoy learning about, history, science. Like they like learning new things. So just keep that in mind as we go through this, and we will come back later. So this is my opinion. Kids don't do homework because two reasons. One, it's too hard. Two, there's no structure. You can divide these up into other sub-reasons, but in my experience, just working with kids of many different types, and frankly having a lot of success working with kids of different types on homework, it always comes down to these two very simple things. It's too hard, meaning maybe they don't understand it, or maybe the assignment is just going to take too long, whatever. Maybe they have like a physical, or a learning difference, that's affecting their ability to do it. And then, of course, there's no structure. This I'm going to get into a little bit more later in this presentation, but obviously this might just come down to the kind of everyday problems that a lot of parents have, the kind of classic, like, I don't want to do my homework, or, I'm saying I'm doing my homework, but I'm really, like, playing Minecraft or whatever. So this is what I'm going to talk about today. I've kind of divided it up into 4 different sections. The first topic is going to be just talking about what is homework. The second one is just going to be talking about, doing homework, like what that looks like. Then how to modify the homework for certain kids. And then the last one, I'm going to go into the idea of motivation. All right, what is homework? So this seems like a very simple question, right? Homework is work you do at home, right? But I actually find a lot of times that there are very simple questions like this that we maybe know, but we don't think about on a deeper level. Like, what does that actually mean to do homework? Why do teachers assign homework every single day? Why are parents constantly telling kids, do your homework, do your homework? Like, what is the purpose of it? And in my experience, being able to fully answer this question actually helps a lot to be able to guide a child towards completing that homework. Homework is practice. That is it, Maybe some teachers complicate things a little bit by, maybe giving homework that is more like you might call busy work. But ideally, homework is practice. This little girl is learning how to play the guitar. And she is going to get better at guitar by practicing. So when your teacher gives the child, practice your multiplication, practice, circle the compound, verbs in the sentence, you're practicing recognizing that, right? You've already learned it in school. So what does a football team do when they practice, right? Because when we think practice, I feel like I usually think about sports or, maybe music or something like that. So when a football team is practicing, like these guys, it runs the plays over and over again, right? So a football team has a certain, play, like, 22 green or whatever, right? And they are going to practice 22 green over and over again. You go here, I put the ball here, and that's what they do. But they're not just practicing plays, right? A football team might be doing drills. Like right here, this is a drill. There are these raised pads on the ground, and all these guys have these kind of fake footballs in their hands, and they're practicing, jumping over and over again over each one as a drill, right? They might lift weights and like run, do calisthenics, get in shape, things like that. And the last thing they might do is like study film of the other team or even film of themselves, right? So they're going to look at, what is the other team going to do on the big game this Saturday or Friday, right? We need to know. So games are tests, right? That's why you're practicing. You're practicing so that you're prepared for the big test. And the better the team studies for the test, the better they're going to perform on the test. And you might recall on the last slide, I mentioned like drills, right? In one of the drills, we saw the picture of it. The players had the ball, and they, jumped over the little obstacle. And here you see a football player in an actual game. What is he doing? He has the ball like this, and he's, jumping. He's practicing like, moving with resistance in short places. And because of his practice doing that kind of drill, he faces that situation in an actual game, and he's much more prepared for it, right? If he didn't do that drill, if his body wasn't just fundamentally used to, exerting in that short space, this player might just yank him to the ground, or he might just fall, or he might drop the ball if he wasn't so used to, running with an upright posture. So since homework is practice, right, what does good practice look like, right? Good practice is targeted, right? Meaning it focuses on specific things. So when we practice, we're not just like, oh yeah, like let's, you know, why don't we run this obstacle today? And why don't we practice that play? No, it's like, it's targeted. You know, we are playing this team on Saturday, and this team is really good at this. So we're going to practice this. And we are really weak at this. So we're going to spend extra time making sure that every single person knows how to do this. Good practice is also repetitive, right? Meaning that you're going to do the same thing until you get it right, right? So I don't know, you know, for you, certainly for me, when I think about times that were bad practice, it was usually when, you know, if I played sports, like the coach just had us do 1,000 different things, right? And yeah, we got through one thing and then we were done, but you know, you don't really master it. You really got to do things over and over again until you get them right. Good practice is progressive, meaning you're doing increasingly challenging things. So I'm going to definitely go into this part a lot later, but it's very important to start at the last place that you know and go just above it, if that makes sense. You know, so like you can think of it like weightlifting as a really good example, right? If I want to get big and strong, I'm not going to immediately lift, you know, the 300-pound, you know, mega weight, but I'm not going to go back to like the 10-pound, you know, dumbbell either. I'm going to see, okay, yeah, I've lifted, you know, 100 pounds twice in a row. So now I'm going to go 105, right? And then the next time 110, right? And then good practice is functional. As we saw before, you want to do things that simulate the game. You don't just want to do like whatever. And definitely you don't want to do things that seem like practice, but maybe aren't practice. So going back to homework for a second, just saying like, you know, here, read a book. You know, like that might be good practice, you know, reading, but is it functional? You know, what are you reading? Why are you reading? What do you need help with, right? You know, progressive. What are you targeting? All those things. So what is bad practice, all right? Bad practice is pointless, right? The people tend to ask that question. Why are we doing this? You know, the sort of like classic, you know, mean like drill sergeant coach who makes you just run. We're going to run laps today until we fall down. And it's like, why? You know, like, how does that help us? Bad practice is disorganized. What are we supposed to be doing, right? That's when, you know, the coach is like, all right, you know, grab a ball and just start playing. You know, you don't learn that way. You don't get better as a team. And then bad practice is punishing. Again, doing things that you hate that don't, you know, seem like come with a reward, come with fulfillment. So learning, in my opinion, learning is kind of a universal concept, meaning even people who have different learning styles, even people who have different maybe academic abilities, people who have special needs, whatever, everybody kind of learns the same way, you know? Learning is brand new at first, right? So whenever you're learning something completely new, you are going to make mistakes pretty much all the time, and you're going to need help all the time, right? So if I'm learning how to, you know, play the guitar like the little girl in the picture, I mean, the first time you pick up that guitar, like you will, I mean, just imagine if you're picking that up for the first time, you're going to make a mistake. You're not going to understand where to put your fingers. You're just going to flail at the strings. You are going to need somebody to stand there and tell you, do this. Or you're going to need some kind of other model, maybe by watching, maybe by exploring. But the point is you're going to make all mistakes, all help. So I feel like the second step of learning is, I mean, I call it the gist, where you're getting a piece of learning. You're still making lots of mistakes. You still need lots of helps, but you get the idea. You know, so if I'm playing guitar, this is the point where I can actually like put my finger on the string, put my other finger here, and play it and like make a sound. You know, I might even be able to like put these two fingers here and make a chord. You know, so I get how it works. And if I'm doing something like you know, math or you know, picking out compound verbs or whatever, like I know what a compound verb is here. You know, I get it. Maybe I get the easiest possible example, but I get it. You know, I can add 2 plus 2. I know how adding works, right? So after you graduate, so to speak, from the gist of it, you get to understanding. And understanding is where, like it says, you understand how to do it. You're making some mistakes, you're needing some help, but you definitely understand it. You know, you can look at that guitar and you don't need somebody to tell you where to put your fingers anymore. You don't need somebody to, you know, to remind you that you have to, like, 2 fingers makes a chord or whatever. You can do it, but you are definitely going to make mistakes still, and you're definitely going to need help still. Which brings us to the most important step, which is mastery. Mastery is no mistakes, no help. I mean, that is, I guess, like, again, kind of an obvious point, but a lot of people overlook that. I mean, mastery really means I'm not making mistakes and I don't need help to do this. That is somebody who you can say, play the guitar, and they will pick up the guitar and they will play it. Not, you know, not, what am I doing wrong? Not, this is hard. That is just somebody who picks it up and they play it. That doesn't mean they have to be a virtuoso. But again, if we're talking about something very specific, they can play those 2 chords, they sound good, they're ready to move on to the next thing. So what I find over and over and over again is most people stop at understanding. They don't go to mastery. And this is like double, triple, quadruple true with kids. Understanding feels like learning, but it's only an approximation. Understanding is a C, D, or an F on a test. If a kid is doing, you know, multiplication or adding fractions or whatever, this is the kid who gets how to add fractions. Like, they've done it successfully. You know, they've like looked at 2 fractions and they've, you know, changed the denominators, and like they've done it successfully. But if you give this kid 10 problems, they're going to get 4 wrong or 3 wrong. And understanding will get you through the homework, you know, for sure. Especially if there's somebody there with you, or if the goal is just to finish. But understanding is a C, D, or an F on a test. Mastery is complete learning. Mastery is the bullseye. This is understanding. This is mastery. Mastery is an A on a test. Again, mastery is 9 out of 10 right, 10 out of 10 right. And if it's 9 out of 10 right, like the 1 wrong should be just a careless error or something. You know, this is the expectation. This is where you want to be. So to put it this way, do you understand how to change a tire, or can you actually do it? Right? So here you are, you're driving in your car, you get a flat, you're stranded out on the road. Yeah, you may understand, you know, oh, I put the jack here and I take the bolts off and then I take my spare tire and I put it on. But can you actually do it? Right? Are you going to have trouble? Are you going to find that, oh, the bolts won't stay on? Oh, the jack, oh, you know, wait a minute, what do I do with this again? Oh, you know, do I take the whole tire off, or do I just, you know, take the wheel off? Like, these are things that happen. And so when you're thinking about learning, you don't necessarily want to stop here, right? You want to go to the next step, which is, of course, mastery. And again, this is the most common problem I see. Obviously, there's other issues that I'm going to get into, but student gets a perfect grade on homework, but still fails the test. That just happens so commonly. And it can actually be really demoralizing, I find, for a lot of kids, you know, where you see the kid night after night, like doing the homework, and they turn it in and the teacher just gives like a check, you know, or a smiley face or something like that for doing the homework. But then it's test time, and, you know, the kid's getting like failing grades, and there's just red ink everywhere, and it's just so demoralizing when it happens. So why do students fail tests, right? As I said before, schoolwork alone will just get you to the gist of the material, meaning like if you're in class every day and you're paying attention and you're following along with the class, you're going to get the gist of it. You'll know what adding fractions are. You'll know what a fraction is. If you do your homework and schoolwork, you will understand it. You'll get to that 6 out of 10 correct kind of position. But homework plus targeted review will get you to mastery. All right, and that's what we talked about, again with the team earlier, right? When we used targeted progressive practice, functional practice, right? So it's not enough to just do homework. You need to target your weaknesses, focus on the game, right? So you want to view studying and through the lens of mastery, right? So this should be the question that I would pose to your children, and you should just have this in mind yourself. But I think you can literally say this to a child, especially older kids. Can I do this 3 times in a row without needing help or without making little mistakes? And if I can do that, why can I do that? Like meaning, how am I going about it? And if I can't do that, then why not? Like, what are those little mistakes I'm making, right? So if I'm adding fractions and, I did it twice in a row, but then the 3rd time in a row didn't work. Why? What was the issue? Did I forget to, multiply the numerators and just do the denominators? Like, what did I do? But again, this is the expectation. And if you're ever, I think having an argument with your child about studying as opposed to just like doing your homework, like if you say, hey, study for the test, or, oh, you don't have any homework, let's study. This should be the expectation. And you know what? If a kid can say, yeah, I can do this 3 times in a row without making a mistake, here, let me show you. Cool, studying took 5 minutes. But if they can't, you have an expectation. You're not just bugging them. And then the child will also understand what the expectation is, if that makes sense. So I find it very useful to do this. You could do this literally, actually like keep a troubleshooting list, or just have this in mind mentally. But make an ongoing list of what you haven't mastered and why, right? So I said before that good practice is targeted, right? So target, right? So most of the time, especially if we're talking about understanding, right? And I said that to me, the difference between understanding and mastery is that understanding is I can do 6 out of 10, right? But not the whole thing, So what 4 things am I messing up, No, keep going. Oh, no, go back on. Sorry. I was just checking the stream. Sorry. So anyway, you want to make an ongoing list of what you have and haven't mastered. So if you can do 6 things right, cool. Let's focus on the 4 things that you can't do right, if that makes sense. Say you're subtracting negative numbers, right? Again, you may know what a negative number is. You may even be really good at subtracting, like 5 minus 7 or something. But, oh, why do I keep getting it wrong? Oh, whenever there's 2 negatives, we change it to plus positive, right? The concept is multiplying negative exponents. Oh, I keep forgetting that, odd powers are negative. Negative 2 to the 3rd power is negative again, right? Like whatever the issue you're having, usually the problem when you talk about studying and when you talk about learning, it is very specific. It is very targeted. It is not just like, oh, let's do it all again, or here, do the homework again. No, do number 14 and number 17 again, because those are the ones you're having trouble with. And then the next night when it's time to study for the test, you're studying this. And maybe all the other stuff, that's just like quick review. That's just like make sure you still got it. But, oh, let's do this 10 times until you got it, right? So drilling, studying, is not the same thing as homework, all right? So if we're talking about the difference between homework and tests again, and we talk about the goal, which is an A on a test, but really the goal is mastery, I would say a weekly drilling session is very important and very useful. And a weekly drilling session will mean good grades on a test, absolutely. Drilling, in my definition, just means repetitive, targeted practice of that week's concepts. So when I say that week's concepts, I just mean like the things that you did that week. So this was negative numbers week, right? So we added negative numbers, we subtracted negative numbers, we subtracted double negatives, and like that's what we did this week. So drill that. We don't have to do tons of work, but let's just go over those 3 concepts, make sure we master them. So bad news, this means extra work, right? And a lot of kids might bristle at that idea of, oh, I already did my homework. Why do I have to do more? Oh, teacher said no homework over the weekend. Well, good news. Drilling is shorter and easier than normal homework, right? And again, the expectation is mastery. I'm definitely going to talk during the last section about sort of structure and motivation and how we can kind of fix these issues. But one thing I can definitely say is just be honest, with your child about why you want them to do their homework, right? We said, what is homework? And I said that understanding what homework is can help you in your approach to working with your child and can help your child as well. And this is what I mean. Being able to tell a child, hey, your goal is to master this. Your goal is to get a good grade on the test. You want to get a good grade on the test? Let's spend 20 minutes going over this week's concepts, and you'll get a good grade on the test. If not, you're going to fail again. It's that simple. Again, I'm going to talk about later kind of how to be consistent and things like that in these expectations, but this is definitely where you want to be. I will say alternately, you can also spend a little bit of time at the end of a homework session or even on a night when there's not much homework. Spend 5 minutes going back to the concepts, making sure that the child understands them is definitely helpful. All right, so part B, doing homework. So when you're actually doing homework, all right, this is by far, I see this like so often, it's ridiculous. Knowing what to do and knowing how to do it. I work with a lot of kids myself. I run a company that does in-home tutoring, and we focus mostly on kids with special needs or learning issues. And I myself will often get called in, I'll meet a kid, whether I'm going to work with them or one of my colleagues, but I'll do this evaluation, and like the parent will tell me, oh, it's so difficult, and he can't do his homework, or he doesn't, just these terrible issues that are going on, and it's very difficult. Obviously, what the parent is struggling with night after night, much less the child. But I often find, like, just going in and sort of setting these 2 things straight, knowing what to do, knowing how to do it, like the results are miraculous. It's like, it's just overnight, all of a sudden, the kid went from grumpy to, pleasant, and the ability to actually finish the homework just like shot up. So I talked again about knowing what to do and knowing how to do it, but I want you to take a look at this picture for a second. This is the operating instructions. I assume how to open some kind of like sewer grates or pressure thing on a British a waterway system. But what you see here are instructions, right? Imagine trying to open a large industrial, perhaps pressurized a water main without the instructions. Even if you were an experienced, engineer, like what would you do, right? You might, again, have some idea how to do it. You might know the gist, you might have some understanding, but inevitably what's going to happen? You're going to get stuck. You're not going to be able to pry it open. Worse, you might break something, right? Here, though, we have detailed instructions. This tells us literally what to do and how to do it. First, you might not be able to read it very well, but it says first, persons entering the lock must keep all something in view at all times, especially when closing the vertical grates. Step 2, before lifting the lock, ensure the bottom particles are closed, manually operated. So it goes on and on like that. It even has warnings here. But the point is, I think that all of us in here, if we followed these instructions step by step, maybe with a guide, we could do this, right? But you got to have the instructions. Could you put this together without instructions? I know I couldn't, and frankly, it's hard to put together with instructions. In fact, my beautiful wife put together something like this not that long ago, and it's hard, right? So you have to know exactly what to do. Instructions should be in steps. First you do this, then you do this, then you do this. How to dance the Yale blues. And this says point and twinkle step, and then you have very specific instructions. But again, the point is, if you follow these instructions, you can do this dance. And then you engage in targeted, repetitious practice, of course, and you'll learn it. But you have to have the instructions. I could watch these people dance, and I could get the gist of it. I might even be able to fake it, right? Get my homework done, right? Get that check, that smiley face. But when it comes time to dance, I'm gonna trip and I'm gonna fall on my face, and it's not gonna go well, right? So you gotta have instructions, and they need to be in steps.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. Forward. Yeah, go back one more. Okay, forward. Thank you, Anzard. Instructions should have examples, all right? So this is what I consider a pretty good example of how to do this math concept. Foil, first, outer, inner, last, if you've been faced with this concept. Oftentimes there's no X there, but still, it tells you pretty much exactly what to do. It even has visual diagrams, because some people see things visually, right? But if I was telling a kid how to do this, maybe the kid is in class. The teacher went over this in class, so the kid maybe has the gist of it, right? But if I'm at home, and it's homework time, and there's 20 problems that look like this, I want to make absolutely positive sure that my child has something that looks exactly like this to be able to keep going, right? Because I know that if my child does not have something exactly like this, then the best I can hope for is maybe understanding, but they're going to get a lot wrong. They're not going to learn it as well as they could otherwise, right? So what do you do when you're lost, right? So if you're driving and whatever, you're walking and trying to find something, you might go through this procedure, right? You first take out your phone, use your GPS, see where you are, right? If your phone is dead or you don't have GPS or whatever, you're going to stop and ask somebody for directions. If that doesn't work, you're going to go double back to the last familiar place. If that doesn't work, you're going to call somebody and you're going to say, hey, I'm lost. I'm 3 blocks away. But if not, you might stop at a gas station and ask, hey, you live around here. Where is blah, blah, blah. And if that doesn't work, I don't know, ask a policeman. I'm not sure what you would do in that case. But the point is when you're lost, right, you're going to have all of these resources in play to get you to where you want to go, right? So if you're trying to do your homework and you're lost, right, you don't know what to do, you need these resources, right? So to me, the magic question is, what do I do first, right? Whenever I work with kids, obviously some subjects more than others, this is always the question that I encounter that is sort of least explored, right? Like whenever you see a kid who is in panic about what to do, you know, to me it's like the classic situation of you go, you know, it's homework time and the kid's like freaking out, like, oh, I don't know what to do, and the, you know, the teacher didn't tell us, and you know, it's always this. It's just, what do I do first, right? You may have the gist of it, you may even understand how to do it, but I mean literally, like, what do I do first? What is the first step? So you want to create layers of resources, right? You always want to have that way to answer that question. What do I do first? Well, look at your notes. It seems obvious, but a lot of kids like take notes or they receive little handouts, things that are like stuck in the bottom of their backpacks, you know, but they don't realize that, you know, those things are actually useful, right? Like those things actually have examples on them. Look in your textbook. Like the textbook, especially if it's you know, something more technical like math or you know, maybe science or even like grammar stuff, like textbook is going to have examples. And usually when kids or even the class goes through something, they skip the first few pages, right? Like they go right to the work. I see kids do that all the time. It's like, oh no, that examples, that's just not homework. Why do I have to look at that? You know, where's number one? You know, if you don't have your textbook or you don't have the answer there, you don't have it in class notes, Google it. Like, how do I use the distributive property in math? You know, and it'll tell you. Absent that, classmate cell phone numbers, right? Like, kids should be able to text, you know, their classmates. You know, to know, like, hey, how do I do this? Or, hey, what was the assignment again? Or was it to do this, or was it to do that? You know, you might have your teacher email, and then again, like, ask a policeman. I mean, you know, there's always something. But you should never, ever, 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 ever be without a backup plan, right? These are things that you can just always have, because again, the goal is to get those steps. The goal is to access that process. The goal isn't for the child to guess. And the goal really isn't for you to stand over them and like tell them, oh, no, you just do this. Oh, no, you just do that. Oh, you know, this is different from back when I was in school, but why don't you try it this way? No. Class notes, textbook, Google, classmate cell numbers, teacher email. Just have this process down, and you know, ideally you want the student to have it down so that in the future the student will just look for these things. You know, the students in class, and like the student's going to be like, okay, where's the example in the notes? Oh, there it is. Okay, I'm definitely going to remember this for later. So your child is going to have, you know, a lot of different teachers, right? Certainly if your child is in a high school like this, your child's going to have like, you know, 7 different teachers. And there's going to be good teachers, and there's going to be other teachers. Now, obviously, your definition of good is relative. Some teachers are good for some parents. Some teachers are good for others. Some teachers are good for the principal at the school. Some teachers, you know, are not. But for your perspective as a parent trying to get a child to do homework, these are the things that you want, right? You want a teacher to provide a homework schedule in advance, and you want the teacher to give clear notes on how to do it. Again, those like step-by-step kind of things, right? So again, like you want the teacher to tell the kid what to do. Like, you know, tonight the assignment is blah, blah, blah. You don't want to have to leave it up to the kid to remember, I guess. But a lot of teachers just assume that the kids know. You know, I'm a teacher, so I've definitely been in the situation where I'm in class and we went over something like 15 times, and I just kind of figure that the kids know because they're all nodding their heads. But in reality, you know, when you're at home and things happen and, you know, other things are on your mind, you really want the teacher to have these things, right? You want a schedule in advance of what's going to happen, maybe even what's going to be due tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And you definitely want a teacher who can give clear notes to the students. So, be proactive. Email, maybe both call and email the teacher early in the year. This is like double, triple, quadruple important if you have a child with learning differences. You need to demand that that teacher gives your child clear instructions. You need to demand that that teacher gives your child clear notes. You need to demand that the teacher check your child for understanding at the end of class. Oh my goodness, that's so important. And you need to demand a breakdown of concepts to study for the test. And again, like, this could be in your child's IEP. This could not be in the IEP. Your child may not have an IEP. It doesn't matter. Like, these are things that, frankly, every child needs. But this is it, right? A lot of teachers will assume that they have this. Like, the teacher might say, oh, yeah, he has his notes. Or, oh, yeah, he said he understood. You know? Or, oh, he should just study what's on the sheet. And it's like, no. Like, I need to know he should study this, this, and this, because this will be on the test. Like, he needs to master how to, you know, divide fractions, how to multiply fractions, you know. I need to know these things. Many teachers think that they're already doing this, right? All he needs to do is check the review we did in class, and he'll be able to study for the test. And you know what? That works for some kids, for sure. But you need to be proactive. You need to demand clear instructions, demand clear notes, demand that the teacher check your child for understanding at the end of class, and demand a breakdown of concepts to study for the test. You know, you, as a parent, obviously you want to have a good relationship, you know, with your child's teacher, and all those things. So, you know, you don't need to be like mean or rude or insult, you know, a hardworking teacher who has, you know, 40 kids. But the truth is, you may only know this teacher for 1 year. And if you are maybe erring on the side of, you know, being a little pushy, if you're erring on the side of being overly, you know, insistent to the teacher, so be it, because you're making sure that your child is not lost. You're making sure that your child is getting what he needs. And as a sort of a hidden bonus, the more you send emails to that teacher, the more you demand these things, the more you give feedback, like, you know, hey, last night, you know, he was studying, but he didn't really, you know, follow the notes you gave him very well. Could you make sure that next time they're in steps? Like, that makes the teacher pay attention to your child, right? So even if you're being bothersome, even if that teacher comes home and he thinks, you know, this parent again, when the parent is in class, the parent is going to be like keeping one eye on that child. And the teacher's going to be keeping one eye on that child. And at the end of class, when it's time to go, you're sure that that teacher is going to be like, hey, what do you have to do for homework tonight? You know, because I don't want your parents emailing me again, right? So when we talk about the kind of things that you want a teacher to provide, meaning like, okay, you're emailing that parent and you're being insistent, well, this is the kind of thing that you might want to demand. Now, this is a high school, or maybe it was 8th grade for this student, but you know, this is you know, definitely an older thing. This is a science thing, but this is what you want. It says Study Guide for Evolution Exam. And again, you may not be able to read it, but it says exactly what the exam is for. It says this exam is designed to assess your comprehension of the reading assignments from the CPO book. So okay, for this test, I got to have comprehension of the reading assignments from the CPO book. And if you were in that class, you'd know what that meant. Review the concepts explored in the completion of our projects. Got it. But they say specifically, listed below are the concepts you should focus on from each assignment. And it tells you exactly. describe, so this would be one of the readings. Describe and explain the word adaptation. Comprehend that an adaptation, understand that blah, blah, blah. And then it gives you all these words that you need to know, right? So that's what you want. You want to be able to review with your child in a way that, you know, specifically targets them. Because again, like, some students can probably do this naturally. Like some students, especially if a student really likes the class and is really engaged, some students can just be in class and just kind of know, oh yeah, we're going to do this. Other students, I know for me in a lot of classes when I was in school, I would just like, you know, I would just see everything and I would have no idea what to study. But this is what you want. And this is what you should definitely insist that the teacher provide, or something like this. All right, so the next section we're going to go over is modifications. And this definitely tends more towards, you know, kids who have learning differences, you know, kids who might be in inclusion environments. But I think a lot of the stuff in here you'll find is pretty universal. So again, I find it important to look at maybe seemingly simple questions. But by answering these simple questions, I think it gives you a better idea of like how to proceed and guide your approach to these issues. So why do we have special education, right? Like we're all here today. You know, why? Why do we have all these, you know, people and all these experts and whatnot? Like, why don't we just let kids kind of figure it out, or, you know, let parents and teachers talk it out, right? Well, special education laws, and again, they are laws, right? They aren't just guides. They are often usually laws, ensure that a child has the opportunity to receive the same education as everyone else. And again, the key word here is opportunity, right? You know, I feel like traditionally, the idea was to segregate kids, right? So like you know, it was just determined, well, you're not maybe as naturally academically able as this other kid, or maybe physically able. So we're not going to try to teach you algebra. We're not going to try to teach you that. We're going to teach you in this other environment. And you know what? If you get really good at algebra in this lesser environment, great. But we're not going to necessarily give you that opportunity, right? But I think what we've all found, certainly parents have found this, but I think, you know, the government has sort of found this one way or another, is that many students are capable of doing the work but face obstacles, right? So the idea is not that you can't do it, and the idea isn't that like you shouldn't do it, it's just that you have an obstacle, right? So, you know, certainly the classical kind of physical disability, right? I mean, if you have a wheelchair, you know, you can't, it's not that you can't play a sport, or you can't play basketball, or, you know, you can't do this or that. It's just you have the obstacle. The obstacle is, you know, obviously physical, right? So special education accommodations are getting you to the point where you can still do the same things despite your obstacle. We're taking that obstacle and we're putting it to the side, and we're going around it instead of just saying, oh, this is our obstacle. Well, let's just have the all wheelchair class. You know what I mean? So a student might have great math skills but poor reading comprehension. Certainly this is really common with a lot of the kids that I work with, making like a word problem difficult, right? So here is this, you know, relatively advanced algebra puzzle. And you know, you find a lot of times kids can do the calculations really well, especially if you show them what to do. But when it comes to actually reading this, picking out the information, that can be more more of a struggle. So like, you have to ask yourself, what do we do if a kid has good math skills but poor reading comprehension? Do we put them in a rudimentary math class, or do we modify and accommodate the reading comprehension issues the best we can so that they can still get it done? So we want to modify the work so that the student is still challenged by the math concept, but not overly burdened by the reading obstacle. So it's not to say that we want to get rid of the reading obstacle entirely. Like, it's not, a modification doesn't mean just saying, oh yeah, forget about trying to do word problems. Here's the numbers, just figure them out. No, we want to teach the child the same sort of methods of looking at information, picking them out, organizing them into numbers. That's the whole point of doing word problems, right? So you can modify by maybe reading the assignment to the student. That happens. You could draw a picture to explain the words. You could break it down into steps, or just like translating it for them. The point is you want to find what level the student is at and sort of bring them up to it. You don't want to tell them what to do. You don't want to avoid the challenge, but you want to do your best to get them to a point where they're learning the same thing, but not completely hamstrung by a secondary issue. So ideally, right, we want to teach the student how to manage his or her own disability. Absolutely. Word problems do exist. They should exist. I mean, they exist in real life, but they're also a very valuable part of math. So we can teach the child strategies to decode word problems, right? Like drawing a picture, breaking it down, comparing similar examples, asking for help. These are things that you would want any child to do, right? But right now, we want to finish the homework before midnight. So as a parent, if you're in this situation, my advice for you would just be to modify as much as is needed to get the student to finish, and then deal with these issues in more of a long-term sense, or in communication with the teacher, or just gradually developing. But I mean, we don't need to spend 1 hour on a word problem. Like, that's just, it doesn't help the child, that doesn't help you at all, right? So these are good modifications. And again, these could be IEP modifications. These could be things that you could do for a student with an IEP. But I mean, these work for anybody. This could work for an honor student, anybody. Good modifications maintain the integrity of the assignment while removing superfluous obstacles. Good modifications teach the student strategies he or she can use personally, right? So going back to something I said on the last slide, or the last two slides really, like by you drawing a picture, teaching the child like to take the information that's in the text and like drawing a picture, that teaches the student that he or she can like take the information and draw a picture, right? That's a good modification. Good modifications save time, for sure. If you read to the child, especially maybe the child has like dyslexia or something, and so just reading that complicated, like especially a lot of math stuff has like names of people from different parts of the world, so it might be hard for a kid who has maybe like visual decoding issues to figure out a lot of that stuff. So you can save time by just reading it to them, right? Good modifications definitely prevent stress, and to me that's always the goal. There's no need again for homework to be this like brutal, unpleasant process. It may be sometimes, but I mean, our goal is to get around that. So here's an example of modifications. All of these I've definitely used to great success. Typing an essay while the student dictates. So if a kid has, just like a lot of kids, I'm sure you find this, like kids who are really good at like speaking, they can kind of talk for days, but also like they're really good at organizing their thoughts verbally. But when it comes to typing, it's like, whether it's a learning issue or just they're not good at typing, a lot of times that slows them down, right? That becomes the barrier, right? So maybe you're going to type while the student dictates, especially if it's not built into the assignment that the student has to type. If the goal of the assignment is just getting the kid to give his thoughts about, Abraham Lincoln, then, dictate. Using a calculator for algebra equations, right? So, I mean, this comes up a lot. Certainly different teachers have different policies on this, but I mean, to me, it's frustrating. Like when a student has to do some very complex multi-step, math problem and has to do like 354 times 22.6 or whatever by hand. I mean, that's just extra unnecessary work. Get a calculator, do it on the calculator, it's okay. Feeding the student a starter phrase. So if the student is having trouble coming up with the essay or like a reading response, in this case, To Kill a Mockingbird, just start the sentence for the student. I think Atticus Finch is a hero because, presenting choices to a stuck student. What would be a good adjective here? Tall, short, fat, skinny, happy, sad? And I actually, frankly, to criticize myself here, I would stick to 3. I wouldn't give 6 examples. You definitely want to keep it simple. Although for some kids, maybe giving them a big list might actually be effective. But generally, 3 examples, especially if a kid who has limited language skills. That's where you want to be. Providing notes instead of copying notes. That's like a great modification that, frankly, I wish all teachers did. I can't stand when a teacher, has a kid just copy things down. I don't know this classroom, but if you look on that whiteboard over there, imagine if you were in this class and you had to just copy every single word down. You're not remembering it, you're just copying it down, and it's probably going to be messy, and you might skip a little information. It just doesn't work. So, giving it to them helps. Drawing a comprehension map, I find, is definitely very helpful. A lot of kids see things visually, or a lot of kids just have trouble maybe intrinsically understanding logic, but by presenting it to them in a sort of first the volcano, then the magma, then they might get it. Filling in the missing steps. For them, definitely. So if a kid kind of knows what to do first, but maybe not what to do second, do the second thing for them. Get them to the third step. And another thing I want to add here, just to my own presentation, this one applies, I would say, more to if you have a child with language issues, speech and language issues.
Not on that board, on the other board.
Oh, good. I would say number 8 here. This would be verbs and prepositions. So provide, verbs, prepositions, maybe even feeling words. So one thing I find quite often with kids is and again, this applies more to kids with who might have speech and language issues, but you might be reading a book and the assignment has to do with comprehension, you know what I mean? Give response to an article or something like that. And a lot of kids might have trouble, why did such and such go to such and such? Or, where did they go on their family vacation or something? A lot of times the language is difficult, but when you give them a choice of verbs, maybe you might write something like this, went, ate, laughed, something like that, played. All of a sudden, I find, for whatever reason, that once kids have these verbs, they are able to get the rest. You know what I mean? So they read the book and they know that the family went on a vacation to the beach, right? But it might be hard for them to say that in their mind. But when you have these words, they're oh, they went to the beach, they ate tuna salad, they laughed when the ball fell in the water or whatever, right? So similarly, giving prepositions with, at, and even feeling words felt happy when, blah, blah, blah. This can work really well, again, for younger kids too, just if you have to write a personal essay or a diary entry or things like that, these can be very useful. So again, as a modification, be proactive. So you want to email or call the teacher early in the year, as I said before. Really explain your child's educational history. Like, yo, my student is the type of kid who, when you say, do you understand? He goes, yes, but he doesn't understand. You know, you need to check for understanding. You need to have him tell you what he's supposed to do. You know, explain the need for modifications. Explain the horror stories. You know what? Last night he spent 3 hours screaming and fretting, you know, because he didn't, you know, have blah blah blah, you know, for his homework. Demand clear instructions. Demand clear notes. Demand that the teacher check for understanding. You know, demand a breakdown of what to study. Again, you know, when you communicate with the teacher and you explain these things, the teacher understands. A lot of teachers, especially if they're not a resource teacher or a special education teacher, like they think they know, you know what I mean, like special education, but they may not understand it to the degree that a true specialist does. And they may have your child's IEP, and they may kind of know what's in it, but they don't know how to implement it on a day-to-day basis. So by really getting the teacher to understand, like, hey, my child, you know, she definitely, you know, understands, she just needs the verbs, you know, so, you know, when you're in class, just give her this list, and I know she'll be able to do it, you know, things like that. All right, so the last section, you know, again, this is something I think, you know, relates to all kids, but the idea of motivation, right? Like, how do I actually get my kid to do homework? Before I get into this, I just want to mention that all of these things that I've talked about before, in my estimation, like, this is 90% of motivation. You know, like, I think when people think about like how to get kids to do homework and how to get them motivated, they think about it in a behavior sense, like a discipline sense. And I mean, that has something to do with it for sure, and I'm going to get into that. But I think understanding what to do and understanding how to do it and getting proper modifications, like that is motivation right there. And that is 90% of the problems with motivation. So like, just as an example, I am definitely motivated to drive my car to work if my work is close. And I actually drive a lot for my work. You know, I teach at a school, but I also, you know, go to homes. I live in the North Bay. So like, some days I'm driving really close to my home, and some days I'm driving really far from my home. And yeah, if it's 10 minutes away, like I have no problem driving there. But I'm not motivated to drive a car if I'm going to sit in traffic for 2 hours. And that's when I usually like think about calling in sick or, you know, quitting and moving to Aruba or something. So, but I might be motivated to sit in traffic for 2 hours if I get paid a lot of money, right? It might be worth it. Or just general responsibility, right? I'm like, you know what? I'm going to sit in traffic for 2 hours today, but tomorrow it'll be worth it, right? So, I mean, that is motivation. It is easy plus reward. Basically, like how easy it is balanced with the reward I get. Pretty simple, I think. So how does motivation have to do with homework? Well, again, what I mentioned before, I think kids accept that they are supposed to do their homework. I've never found a kid, even though some kids might, you know, make, you know, sort of excuses about like, why do we have homework? Or, you know, I'm not gonna have to do this, you know, you know, when I'm an adult and I'm a surfing instructor or whatever. But I think kids accept that they're supposed to do their homework. It's like one of their main responsibilities. They're told all day, every day, all their peers do it, you know, their siblings do it. I also think that kids want to make good grades and kids want to please their parents, for sure. All kids want to be the kid who gets straight A's. Kids love it when parents say great job. Kids love it when the teacher says great job. I'm sure for all of you, I know for me, like some of my happiest moments in life, I think, were like, I got that test back and it said like, you know, 98. And you're like, yes. Kids want that. And as I said before, kids like learning new things. Even though they might complain about it, even though they might say otherwise, I mean, kids are kids. They're young. They're learning. And I think they enjoy the things, at least on a deep level. Kids resist doing homework because it is too hard. There is no structure. I think I already went into the too hard aspect and how we can solve this by providing steps, by providing clear examples, modifications if necessary. But I'm going to get into this number 2 here about structure. Because a kid could understand how to do the homework for sure. But if there's no structure, I mean, I don't know. A kid would probably just choose to, like, you know, play video games or whatever instead of homework. So again, motivation is improved most by knowing what to do, knowing how to do it, and by providing modifications. But children do need a minimum level of structure to do their homework. Structure comes through teacher expectations, which is grades, right? I mean, the kids understand, like, you know, do this homework and, or don't do this homework, I guess you could say, and you're going to get a bad grade, etc. Structure comes through parent expectations, which is responsibility. You know, again, if parents tell them, do your homework, that's responsibility. Take out the garbage, responsibility, right? Consistency, big. 6 p.m. is homework time at the kitchen table. If that's how it is, I mean, that's structure, you know? And then environment, right? Structure comes through having a calm, quiet, distraction-free environment. You know, some kids can work with their phones next to them. Some kids can work while listening to music. Some kids, whatever. I mean, kids are different, right? But generally, the structure of the environment being conducive to learning, you know, is easier, right? Like, obviously, we are ourselves here in a highly structured environment, right? Like, I'm teaching. I have, you know what I'm supposed to teach. You all are sitting, looking at me. If I was, like, in the middle of the hall earlier during lunchtime, you know, it just would not be as easy to follow what I'm saying. You probably would only be able to follow what I'm saying for a few minutes before, you know, you would get distracted and go somewhere else, or you would just get tired of having to, like, strain and listen among all the rabble, right? Power hour. So my children actually are most afternoons they're in the Boys and Girls Club, and they have something called Power Hour, where which is a regular time and place only for homework. So basically, like, the kids show up at the Boys and Girls Club, and they just know for 1 hour they sit and they do homework, right? There's no games, no playing, no whatever. It's not the most structured, you know, in the world, because there's a lot of kids and, you know, maybe not as many staff. So yeah, if the kid really wants to get away to do something else, you know, so be it. But the point is, it's a regular time and place for homework. And usually, if it's, like, easy homework, my kids always do it, you know, or my daughter is the one who has the most homework. But I mean, if it's easy homework in a class and she understands what to do and how to do it, like, she always comes home and she's done it during Power Hour. So by having, like, a regular time, a consistent place, it changes homework from being a request, meaning, like, please turn off the TV and do your homework, to an expectation, like it's 6 p.m., right? And I mean, that's so important, right? Because that takes out the power struggle, right? Like, I don't need to convince my child to turn off the TV. I mean, maybe you still need to do that, but I don't have to, like, explain why they should do their homework. Like, the answer is it's 6 p.m. We did it yesterday, we did it the day before. And similarly at the Boys and Girls Club, like, they don't have to take all the kids, you know, put away the balls, get the kids away from the playground, you know, all that stuff. They just know it's Power Hour. It's time to sit and do your homework. Like, the kids don't disagree with that. They don't argue with that. They just know. And the other great thing when you have consistency, you have standardized rewards and standardized consequences. So if you're doing homework at 6 p.m. Every single day, you also have just, standard rewards. Like, you finish your homework and, you get to watch TV again. You don't. It's just very, very simple, but you can do that when you have this time set aside, right? Or else, you're kind of stuck with like, oh, one day, this is the consequence. And then maybe the next day the consequence is I'm going to yell, do your homework now, but you want things standardized. So discipline. I actually used to work in a juvenile detention center, and I've worked in a couple of schools for kids, who have like emotional and behavioral issues as well. And so I definitely got to see the idea of discipline on its most like fundamental level. And with a lot of those kids, there's not much room for messing up. It's really easy to just things to degenerate into chaos. So what I kind of figured out is that discipline is basically three, I think, very simple concepts. You need to be clear, you need to be consistent, and you need to be firm. Clear means like what the expectation is. You have to be clear. Complete your homework with your best effort. The more exact you are, like the more clear you are, the more likely kids are to do it. If you just say, do your homework, that's definitely clearer than not saying it at all. But what does that mean, do your homework? Like, for how long? What if there is no homework? Or I tried, or, oh, look, my homework's done. Complete your homework with your best effort. I think that's a reasonable request. And I don't think, a kid's gonna, debate that too much. Consistent, I would say by far the most important of these three, although they're definitely all important. Consistent means how, where, and when. So complete your homework with your best effort, but consistently. Every night, 6 p.m. at the kitchen table. If you do that, then the kid will go to the kitchen table every day at 6 p.m. And what you're going to find, as far as discipline goes, is you don't need to be a disciplinarian if you're consistent, right? Because the kid knows what he's supposed to do. There's no surprise. There's no like, turn off that TV now, go sit at the kitchen table and do your homework. No, it's just, we did this last night. We did this the night before, the night before, the night before. And the kid will do it, 6 p.m. every night at the kitchen table. And firm is the enforcement, meaning, finish your homework or no video games. That's a pretty reasonable, I would say, firmness, but you need to be firm with it. Like, there's no sort of, oh, you didn't finish your homework. Well, you can go play. Just be firm. And I think what you'll find is that, like, I would say all of these are related to consistency. So, you need to be consistent with your firmness. And I think what happens a lot of times is we are consistent whether we realize it or not. So, like, you may be consistently a pushover. Right? And if you're consistently a pushover, the child recognizes it. And then, it's always that kind of classic, like, oh, come on, and it's like the child is saying, oh, come on, because the child knows consistently that works. But if consistently you're firm and you're just like, sorry, you didn't do your homework, then you know what? The child can tantrum, the child can do whatever he wants, but you are consistent. All right, so consequences. I would say good consequences are immediate, right? Good consequences are, natural, right? So like no phone, so like say you don't do your homework, right? Then you lose your phone tomorrow. Or you don't get dessert tonight. Or, if you're a teacher, a lot of teachers do this, like for little kids, okay, you're going to have to sit here during recess and finish your homework. Like, those are good consequences because they're very immediate, they're very natural, And like they get your child's attention. You know, the child doesn't want to lose the phone. But at the same time, they're not like catastrophic. It's not like, you know, no phone for a whole week, you know, no dessert for a week, you know, finish it before school. Like things that to me are sort of like, it's not like the child didn't do the homework for a week. The child didn't do the homework that night. So why are you taking away the phone for a week, right? And then like finishing the homework before school, I mean, that's like, so you're gonna wake up really early and be tired and then like do it then? Like to me, that's not really a consequence. That's just kind of weird. You know, it doesn't naturally relate to what the issue was. So rewards, right? Similarly, good rewards are immediate. Like you get video game time when you're done with the homework, right? You get a piece of candy, especially if it's a little kid, but even big kids like that. You get a bonus on your allowance, you know, but it's like every time you do it. Not like bad, you know, not like you get a whole new video game system because you did your homework tonight, you know, or you get a, you know, let's go out for ice cream because you did your homework, you know, or here's $20. It's like, I see this a lot, and it always kind of irks me a little bit when I see it, where like a parent will say, if you get, you know, B's or above this semester, I will give you a new video game system or whatever. And it's just like, that's not a good reward because it's just too, like it doesn't address the day-to-day issues. But I think if you do this every day, it adds up to this, if that makes sense. You know, you get a B or better on your report card because you're doing your homework every night, because you're studying. Good rewards like are just extra, you know, they add on. Bad rewards, like, are you going to get him a new video game system like every night? You know, it just doesn't make sense. And then the next night, the student's not going to get the new video game system, and then it's just going to be like, well, I'm not going to do my homework, you know. So in addition, right, there are intrinsic rewards. And like I personally don't get too hung up in rewards or consequences for that matter. I mean, to me, they're just, they just are what they are, you know. Because like these are the real rewards. You know, a student gets done with his or her homework, and it's like the student learns something, and the student is happy. Oftentimes, especially if it's like a good class or a good homework assignment, like the student is happy finishing the project. You know, and like, I mean, again, looking up on the board over there, I see in this classroom, it says stellar student work. You know, again, I don't know anything about this class or who the teacher is, but I mean, whoever did that was probably really happy, you know? And even more so when the teacher put it up on the board. And like every day that student gets to be in this class and look over and see that and be reminded of like, you know, when he did that assignment. Getting you off my back, that's a big motivation for kids. Like kids want to do their homework so that you'll stop bugging them to do their homework, you know? Fear of failure, students don't want to know what happens when they fail. You know, and you lose trust or whatever happens. I mean, that just keeps, I think all of us sort of, we go to work because maybe we don't want to know what happens if we don't go to work, you know. We don't want to have to explain to people that we lost our job, you know, like we want to keep going. And same thing, punishment, avoidance. These are intrinsic rewards, and I would say these are, you know, probably the biggest. So, the one thing I just want to add, because this came up actually in the past when I gave this presentation, is like when you talk about behavior and discipline, like one time I got a question about like how long does it take, you know? So like my kid won't do her homework, you know, or his homework. And every time I ask, you know, it just becomes an argument and nothing gets done. Like, how long does it take? I get what you're saying. And I actually have a good answer to that. It takes 2 days. So whenever you're instituting a new behavior policy, you know, something new to be consistent about, the first time you do it, there's going to be resistance. There's going to be testing. Because like the child is gonna sort of wonder, okay, well what, you know, you're testing, like what happens? I mean, if you think about like in a prison or something, I mean, the first thing you're going to do is kind of figure out like, okay, how much do these handcuffs, stretch? Oh, well, if I just ask this guard for blah, 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 will he, hit me over the head, or will he give in? These things you test. And so kids might test in huge ways, and you might find it gets worse the first night. Like you get the worst, most titanic tantrum in the world. But once you pass that test, if you stay consistent, if you stay firm, write it out. The next night you get back to it, it'll be a lot easier. And then the third night, like it'll just be wet tantrum. All right, so definitely any questions that you might have. This is my presentation. Feel free to ask them now, and then when we're done, you can I'll come up and ask me personally as well. Yes?
Question. You mentioned that consistency is really important.
Yeah.
6 p.m. every day at the kitchen table.
Sure.
What if your kid is involved with like say you have multiple kids.
Right, right.
Someone has like soccer and then someone has like dance or whatever, and so it's really hard to find a consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any suggestions for that?
I mean, it's tough without knowing, details maybe about, your specific situation. But certainly, every child is different, right? So some people, aside from just what you said, I mean, some kids get their work done like right after school. They come home and it's just like, bam, I'm ready, get it done. Some kids wait until before bed, right? So I mean, I guess my only answer is to find the most consistent, workable remedy. It might even change, for different days. Yeah, I mean, just find that time. 6 o'clock one day, 8 o'clock another day. But I think again, if you think about whatever the activities your child is doing, there's consistency with that. And so the child knows that Thursday at 5 o'clock is dance because Thursday 5 o'clock is dance, and even if the child might be tired, when he or she comes home from dance, I think you just get used to that being tired and you do what you do to get done, if that makes sense. I know for myself, Sundays are very busy days for me. So Monday comes around and Monday is about survival, right? But Tuesday and Wednesdays are fairly low stress days for me. So I do different things on different days. I guess that would be my best example. But you can have consistency in inconsistency, if that makes sense. Yeah.
If you have teachers give out a whole page of things to do,
Mm-hmm.
and you know that your child will not be able to go through the whole page,
Mm-hmm.
would it be for you if you ask the teacher, can we only do 5? Would it be modification,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or would it be having less expectation of
No, I think modifying for length is what you're talking about, and that's a standard thing. And a lot of teachers, I didn't mention this, but perhaps it's a good thing to add for a future lecture, is good teachers give homework based on time rather than length, right? So I think a good teacher understands that, my man Anzer here might finish his homework in 20 minutes, but another kid might finish it in 2 hours. It's the same assignment. So to say that they should both do 50 problems, I don't know how realistic that is. And a teacher, again, what I said earlier is that bad practice is punishing. And teachers should not punish. So absolutely, I think if a kid, maybe pick the most representative assignments or parts of the assignment, and do those. Yeah, absolutely. Modify for length, for sure.
Just can I make one quick comment? If you are leaving a couple minutes early, please do make sure to turn in your evaluations. Thank you.
Yeah. And I'll be here as well, so don't feel in a rush.
Another question about
Sure.
when you say completing homework with your best effort.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of kids want to do it till they get the gist of it.
Yeah.
So I don't know as a parent how you can tell your best effort. Sometimes they rush through it and they might not understand it. with
Yeah.
errors.
Sure.
They want to just get off so they can get on their iPad.
No, you're totally right, and it's how you define those expectations. So I mentioned like having clear expectations. That you are able to define those clear expectations. For me, it's funny because like when I say things like best effort or make your best guess, sometimes that happens a lot, especially in like math kind of things. Usually when I say it, I'm like you, I'm like, oh, that's just letting you kind of BS me, and give less than your best effort. But, I actually find that like 99% of the time, like the student really does kind of give his best effort. And I would say that the reason is because it's how you say it. It's kind of one of those unstated things like, and the child knows that best effort means thinking about it, giving an answer that he or she thinks is right. And you can even say, like you hear teachers say that, was that your best effort? I don't think so. So it's something you can define. And maybe I kind of answered your question by saying like you have to think about it and give it. But I mean, you can look at the assignment and you can say, this is not your best effort, or try this one again or whatever. But, again, it's like, these are your rules, and if you are consistent about them, the child will follow them. I mean, an analogy that I sometimes use is like, for like extreme behavioral situations, like North Korea or something like that. When you see this on the news, and it's like, oh, there's a picture of the dear leader in every house, and all these people have to bow to it every time they enter a room. And I mean, these things would seem very absurd if I asked you to do them right now, right? Or if you asked your child to do them. But they do that, presumably, in that country because they are enforced very firmly and they are done very consistently and the expectation is very clear. Bow to the dear leader, have it hanging at a certain angle every time, and if you don't, forced labor or whatever, right? So if you wanted that to be your expectation and you feel like you have that in you to enforce, I mean, do it,
In the strategy to how to improve a child's attention
Mhm.
to the whole child.
Right,
We
right.
do the prompt, differently.
Yeah, for attention.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, attention is, kind of a separate issue, but without knowing your child, I would say the idea of like clear steps, clear structure. You may obviously, like, depending on the child, I know some kids need frequent breaks, especially young children. So a young children might work for 5 minutes and work for 2 minutes. So I mean, certainly things like timers. But it's all about structure. So I didn't go into this that much, but I mean, how you structure the environment. So I know, like, when I work with kids sometimes who are like very young and just are like all over the place. They just won't sit still even for a second. I know I have to keep things very structured. I have to make a schedule of what we're going to work on. They see. I usually have them get involved. First, we're going to do math, then we're going to read, then we're going to take a break, and I might have a timer, and we're going to be sitting at the table. And certainly for some kids, I mean, sometimes you're literally like sitting super close to them so that you're like physically keeping them there. But you certainly, like, you have to keep it as structured as is necessary, definitely. But if it's just like average kids who like have like sort of ADD, that classic thing, I mean, you must have steps. Those kids are going to get derailed as soon as they don't know what to do. Even if it's a minor obstacle, like a minor step, they're going to see it as a huge, huge problem. So I mean, clear, like, first you do this, second you do this, third you do this. And I think you'll find a lot of those problems will go away. Yeah.
How would you manage a situation where you have two children, one has, like my younger daughter, she has ADHD,
Mm-hmm.
older daughter, a couple years older, two grades up, and she can sit, focus, and do her homework.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm trying to manage the both of them.
Mm.
They don't need the same kind of structure or
Right.
the
Sure.
How do you go about making it all work? Because if my older daughter sees that this one's not working, then she won't.
Yeah.
They kind of
Play off each other. Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing I can say is that family dynamics are difficult. As a just as like a tutor myself, and as a parent, I find that sometimes, it's a lot harder working with my own daughter than it is working with other people's daughters. The same approaches work, definitely, but it's a little more difficult sometimes. They know they can maybe bounce things off you a little more than they would with a stranger or something. That being said, different things work for different kids. So you may want to look at, how they're working, like when and what their needs are. Like, do they have to be in the same room? Do they have to be at the same table? As you were saying, maybe the same time. They don't have to be. But I think having consistent expectations, like the goal is not how they work. You know what I mean? The goal is like what they do. And being very clear with them about what their expectations are, I think is great. And you may even find that they support each other if they understand what each other's like deficits are. I don't know. I mean, I have 3 kids, and 2 of them are in school. I mean, of school, age, and they're like completely different. What they're good at, but they're different, and it's like I don't compare them to each other, except just that. You need to work on this and you need to work on that, and you need to sit still and you need to like not sit still. It's kind of that. Anyway, so I think we're about at the end, but I am going to be here, standing here. So if you have any other questions, feel free to come on up. Thank you. Stop that stream, Monzer.
Amy, right now.